everyone. Welcome to Bible 365, day 194. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and so I am reading through the Bible in 365 days. 1 year I'm taking to do the chronological Bible reading plan, which you can find online at oneyearbibleonline.com, and it is a free downloadable reading plan. I have no affiliation with this place. I just really like the order in which they have everything in. Chronological means that we're going through it historically and not the way it's written in the Bible. So if you just have a Bible and you've never gone through it before, download the reading plan because it's going to be not completely, but very much out of order. And so we're going to be in different books at different times. Today's not one of those days. We just actually have one Psalm. But so today our reading is it is Psalm 119, and it is July 12th. So we are sort of coming down to the end of Psalms, but we're not quite there yet. And so today is one Psalm, and it is one Psalm only because it is a ridiculously large and long Psalm. Historically, this is where we are in our walk. So there are two nations, the nation of Judah, the nation of Israel. This is the Israelite people that were taken from the land of Egypt by the Lord. So they were slaves in the land of Egypt. The Lord brought them out of Egypt, established them in the land that the Lord created for them, the land of flowing with milk and honey. So it was like an amazing place to be. And all they were supposed to do was to be representatives of the Lord in this area and let the rest of the nations in the world know who God was by being good representatives. And they were good representatives because they were supposed to follow his statutes and decrees, right? Everything he said. We can call them the 10 Commandments, but it's more than that. It is all of his commands, the heart behind him, have faithfulness in him, right? Follow him in all the things that he does and all the ways that he is, right? And the things that he says. And so it's not really just a list of to-dos and to-don'ts, but it's more than that. And it is faithfully serving him in a loving way and honoring him as the God that he is. How do I honor God and know who he is by reading the words that he wrote about himself, and therefore I can understand who he is. So we are in the time where the nation of Israel has sort of collapsed. Assyria has taken them over, and now we are left with the land of Hezekiah, which is a king down in the kingdom of Judah, and he is a descendant of David. All that historically speaking, now we are in the Psalms, which are bits of poetry or song. And King David, established this musical area of the Levitical priests where they play music and they sing songs and they create these songs. David made a lot of these Psalms, but they made more. And so we have 150 Psalms in the collection of Psalms. I am sure there are many, many more than that, but those are the ones that were written down for us to remember. And it's likely because they encompass most of who God is, right? So this is a reminder of who God is and how we are to live as people that follow God. Today we are in Psalm 119. We do not know who Psalm 119 is written by. So it can be written by a number of different people. It has no information in regards to that. It could be written by one person. I am going to take it that it is written by one person. And the reason is because of the way in which it's written. I feel as if this is supposed to represent one person in their walk with the Lord on the earth. I could be wrong. So I was talking yesterday about possibility space. I want to leave this open. I'm going to share it as if it is one person, but it could be multiple writers just writing about the life of a faithful follower of God. It looks to me as if it's different seasons in a person's life, right? In a believer's life. And so that's how I'm going to represent it. I feel like that stays true to what it is that the psalmist is trying to say and to share with the people. Now, saying all that, there's actually going to probably be a lot more that the psalmist is trying to share that I'm not too familiar with or that I didn't dig into. So for example, you can see if you have read it, it's broken up in a whole bunch of different sections, which is different than any other psalm that we've read. And so it starts with Aleph, and then it goes to Beth, and then it goes to Gimel. And so these are letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And so what we see is every letter is represented. So again, another reason why people could go, well, these are multiple psalmists, or this is a psalmist trying to represent a story or the Israelite people, which again could be very true, right? It's psalmists kind of piecing together what it means to live as an Israelite in the world, right? That could be a really another good telling of this story. But it is broken up very deliberately in these letters. Each letter has a meaning. And so I started going into some of that. Like, what are the meanings? So, Aleph, for an example, but it has multiple meanings. So, it could mean master, it could mean oneness, because there are multiple meanings. So, Beth, for example, is it could be two genders, or it could be the idea of plurality. And so, because this was a challenge, I didn't think it was appropriate for this video. And I'm not saying I won't ever do it. I'm not saying that it has no import. I think it does. I think it actually is very important. It's just in the small time that we have together that I kind of get attention from people. It didn't really feel like the time and the place to dive too much into that. But I would love if you guys dove into that. I think that would be awesome. And if you guys know like historical data, or if you're familiar with Hebrew, I think it's an awesome thing to go into and to kind of help to understand. All right, so breaking down some of this, it looks to me like it's stages in life. And this is why I think that, because, or again, stages as a walk as a believer, or stages in a psalmist very particularly in life. So he starts out in verse 1. I always assume it's a guy because the Levites that served were mostly men, not saying that women didn't have offer anything in a community, but they were mostly men that served in the church, or in the temple, excuse me. Blessed are those whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the laws of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his statutes and seek him with all of their heart. So these people who do these things, right, whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law, who keep the Lord's statutes, who seek the Lord with all their heart, which is one of the things that God consistently said about David. They do no wrong, but follow his ways. Those people are to be blessed, right? And then he follows up and he said, you've laid down precepts that are to be fully obeyed. So you've laid down these ideas for this nation to follow. And these things are supposed to be fully obeyed. If you have read the Old Testament, if you have shared in this with me at all, you will recognize that we have not seen that, right? Yes, God says they are to be fully obeyed. That is true. The people have not fully obeyed all of God's precepts. They have consistently fallen away. They have fallen short. They have turned away. They have turned towards other gods, right? All of these things these people have consistently done. And then he says, as the psalmist, oh, that my ways were steadfast in obeying your decrees. So he's recognizing, I believe, again, could this be that he's young? He's recognizing in some ways that he is falling short, right? He is not doing the things to be blessed. He said, then I wouldn't be put to shame when I consider all your commands. I will praise you with an upright heart as I learn your righteous laws. So for me, this is somebody in the beginning. So I'm going to say in the beginning stages of their faith, but I want to be clear in some ways that probably for this person, it was when they were younger. Because in the nation of Israel, whether they followed or didn't follow, right? Because there were many, many seasons where Israel did not follow the Lord. The temple was still there. The 10 Commandments were still available. The priests still went in and offered sacrifices, right? So things were still being done. So there was still an understanding. So it would be like in our nation right now, like right where we live, people still know God, right? Whether they believe him or don't believe in or don't believe in him, right? There's an understanding that probably everybody in this country knows or has heard of God and the way in which people who believe in God, right? And they might have misrepresentations and all these other kind of things, but they believe in God. So I'm going to say this is probably somebody younger, which would be different than us in some ways, because I've shared with you on multiple occasions, I didn't come to faith until I was in my 30s. I had heard of God, but I didn't understand God. And so for me, my beginning stages, I wasn't young, but I was young in the faith, right? So there is a distinction between the way Israel led and lived, right, and the way that now many Christians do, right? Like if you go to a nation where they don't know Christianity, which there actually are a lot of nations still that don't know who Jesus is, that have never heard of him. And so they could be adults learning their faith for the very first time. Just sharing that. So he says, oh, as my ways are steadfast, then I won't be to shame. I will praise you with an upright heart as I learn, right? So he wants to learn your righteous laws. I will obey your decrees. Do not utterly forsake me. So he's kind of in this place where like maybe things aren't so great. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to look to you and I'm going to reach out to you and I want to learn everything there is to know about you. Following up in that next section, because then he follows, and I think it's the same thing. Like, how can somebody stay on the path of purity? So he seems to be learning some things, and he's like, how can we do this? Well, by living according to your word, right? So I have the power by living according to your word. I need to seek you with all of my heart. Praise be to you, Lord. Teach me your decrees. So let me learn, like, as I'm trying to understand this, and I want to learn what it's like. And then in verse 16, he sort of finishes the section with, I delight in your decrees. I will not neglect your word. So as he's learning, as the Lord is teaching him, right, he's saying, I'm not going to neglect those ways. Moving into this next section, it says, be good to your servant while I live. Verse 19, I am a stranger on earth. Do not hide your commands from me. So it's like, keep helping me, keep teaching me, keep showing me who you are. Protect me while I'm learning and trying, because I'm kind of messy and I'm not really doing it that well. And then it looks like in this next section, the left section, that the psalmist is in a struggle. He says, I'm laid low in the dust. Preserve my life according to your word. Now, could this be that he's sick? Could it be he's dying? Could it be the enemies have come against him? We don't necessarily know. Could it be that he has strayed from the Lord's decrees, right? And so now bad things are befallen him because he has strayed from the Lord's decrees. He says, I gave an account of my ways and you answered me. Teach me. So he's still calling out to be taught. Verse 28, my soul is weary with sorrow. Strengthen me according to your word. But in verse 30, he says, I have chosen the way of faithfulness. So even though these things are happening, I've chosen the way of faithfulness and I've set my heart on your laws. I'm not giving up on you. I run in the path of your commands because you have broadened my understanding. So now it's like the more this person is learning, right, the more he wants to kind of dive in and live for the Lord, even though he's not in the greatest of places. And I'm going to say, bear with me, by the end, I don't think that changes. It doesn't seem like he's ever, flourishing. Even though in the very beginning it says, blessed be those who follow, right? It doesn't seem like he still seems like he's crying out to the Lord. So hearing this psalmist, there's not necessarily a happy ending in that it all finishes well for him. And he's like, oh, and now wealth is mine and happiness is mine and my family is amazing, right? It never really comes to that place. So let's see where it goes. So he's still saying, teach me, direct me in your commands, right? And he wants more confidence. It seems like he's got more confidence in the Lord, but he continues to need God and lean on him. So even as he's learning more and understanding more, because then in verse 7 it says, turn my eyes away from worthless things. Preserve my life according to your word. And then we go down to the next section and it says, more, for me, it's more understanding of God. Verse 43, he says, never take your word of truth from my mouth, for I have put my hope in your laws. This is where I think we see a change from verse 5, right? In verse 5, he said, oh, that my ways were steadfast in obeying your decrees. So like he's sort of wishing that he had followed his decrees. And now here he's saying, never take your word of truth from my mouth because I put my hope in that, right? So now I wasn't following it, but now I'm putting my hope in it and I'm following it more. And I want you to teach me more because I'm putting my hope in all that you are and all that you've done. And then he says, I will always obey your law forever and ever. I will walk about in freedom because I sought out your precepts. So he's free, even though he's not in the greatest of places. He's free because he sought out God's precepts. This is something that we who really love the Lord, I think this is where we find our peace and our blessings. We find our peace and our blessings not in our circumstances. And boy, I feel like every Christian that says this, but it's really not. It's not in your circumstances. It's not in what is happening today, because today could in some ways become the worst day of my life, right? Like today I could get into an accident. Today I could, I say that because it wouldn't be the first time. Today I could lose something. Today I could, something could happen to my family. Like, but my delight is still in the Lord and all of his decrees. And it's because I have a greater understanding of who he is, that's how I find my delight in him. And that is always my end goal in doing this podcast that I'm doing, is the end goal is when you walk away from this at the end of the year, you go, wow, because I understand God more, I actually am more peaceful. Even though my circumstances haven't changed at all. It's only been a year, right? Like my circumstances are still exactly what my circumstances were. Or maybe my circumstances have gotten worse. And yet I have more peace because I delight in God's laws and decrees. And we're going to see this over and over with this guy. Verse 47, for I delight in your commands, right? I'm not going to be put to shame because I delight in your commands. This next section in verse 52, he says, I remember, Lord. So now I feel like he's a little bit older and he's remembering what he has learned. I remember, Lord, your ancient laws, and I find comfort in them. Indignation grips me because of the wicked who have forsaken your law. And now he's turning it around a little bit. He's like, so first he was the guy who wasn't really paying attention. And now he's like, man, I can't believe that these guys aren't listening to you. So he's indignant about the wicked not observing God. How can you not see, right, who the God is? And he says in verse 55, in the night, Lord, I remember your name that I may keep your law. This has been my practice. I obey your precepts. So he's continuing to obey him. In this next section, it seems like even in his greater understanding, he still asks God to teach him. So it seems he's a little bit older. He's learning more. He's a little more comfortable, but he's still crying out to be taught. He says in verse 58, I sought your face with all my heart. Be gracious to me according to your promise. Right? I will hasten and not delay to obey your commands. I will not forget your law. I'm a friend to all who fear you, to all who follow your precepts. But then he follows and it says, the earth is filled with your love, Lord. Teach me your decrees. So he doesn't give up on learning. He doesn't give up on growing in this area. He doesn't think he's got it all figured out and understood. He says, teach me. He still wants to learn. Moving down into this next section, same thing. I'm thinking he's a little bit older. He says in verse 66, teach me knowledge and good judgment, for I trust your commands. So now he says, teach me your decrees. And now he's like, teach me knowledge and good judgment because I've trusted you now. Because I trusted you, give me more. I trusted you in all these things. I'm following you in all these things. And now give me more. I need and desire more from you. And I think this is how we as Christians should be growing in the Lord. There shouldn't be this stagnant, like, well, I accepted, right? I accepted you way back when. It should be continual growth. When you go, oh man, I already read the Gospels. Like when you're bored of his word, you're not reaching out and asking him for more, right? And the chances are is because you think that you kind of already arrived and you're already there. And that's the opposite of what this psalmist is saying. He's saying, teach me more, give me more. In verse 71, he says, it was good for me to be afflicted so that I might learn your decrees. So there's a recognition in him that without being afflicted, he wouldn't follow the Lord. So affliction equals more from the Lord, right? Affliction equals learning from the Lord, understanding God more. Is there a call out, right? That there's a need for affliction, so we lean heavier on the Lord. Following up, may those who fear you rejoice when they see me, verse 74, for I have put my hope in your word. And this is section, I think, is how others see him, right? So now other people, and this is one of the things that God tells us to do, right? Let all the nations see. And he's letting them see, right? And he says, let others fear, right, when they see me. Let those who fear you rejoice. So he's like, he's exciting to other people. So they're like rejoicing when they see him because he's living for the Lord and he's finding joy in the Lord. Verse 79, it says, may those who fear you turn to me, those who understand your statutes. May I wholeheartedly follow your decrees that I may not be put to shame. Again, having other people see and understand what it is that he's doing. Next section, my soul faints with longing for your salvation. Again, I think he's getting older. He's starting to see life is at an end. Nothing seems to be going amazingly for him, even though he's still leaning on the Lord. He says in verse 86, all your commands are trustworthy. Help me, for I am being persecuted without cause. Other people are persecuting him. They almost wiped me from the earth, but I haven't forsaken you. In your unfailing love, preserve my life so that I can obey the statutes of your mouth. Preserve me only so I can follow you. Save me just so I can follow your commands and do everything it is that you ask. Right? And now he's reminding himself in this next section who the word is. So he's your word, Lord, is eternal. So now he's focusing on like everything about the word of the Lord. Don't neglect the word of the Lord. I know I'm here and I'm doing this, so I'm hoping that you guys are reading as well. Don't neglect the word of the Lord. It has been given to you. It has been put in this book. Never be like, well, I say it and it sounds nasty. Let me take away the nasty. I pray to the Lord and I listen to what Jesus says to me. Or you say, I really only read the red letters, right? If you've ever heard this expression, it's Jesus's words in the Gospels. I really only read the red letters because I just want to do what Jesus tells me to do. Without a full, clear, and complete understanding of what God has done, according to God and according to his people from beginning to end, you don't know him completely. And I know that's not encouraging, right? I know I just came out and I was challenging, and I want to be clear that it's because I want people to really understand the nature of the Lord, not this picture that they go, well, Jesus was really, really kind and forgiving and loving, and he reached out to the needy. By the way, God did that too. We've seen all these Psalms where God is like, the proud, I'm going to knock off their peg. And even he says this. He says, the psalmist says, we already learned it. It was good for me to be afflicted so that I might learn your decrees. So he is now the needy and the broken, right? So God has always lifted up the needy and the broken. And sometimes he breaks the unneedy, right? In order to make them needy and broken. So they reach out and they reach out to him. So he keeps finding his joy and his love in the word of the Lord. I'm going to go down to this Samek area, and it says, I hate double-minded people, but I love your law. You are my refuge and my shield. I have put my hope in your word. God, and this is my follow-up to what I just said, God equals God's word. God's word equals his law. God's law equals his decrees. God's decrees equals his commandments. Do you understand? So everything is equal to each other. Now, we're going to find out soon some of the things that Jesus fulfilled in the law, because you're going to say to me, well, if God is law, then why do we eat shellfish? And trust me, I promise you, it's there, it's coming. It's just not yet. Right now, we are still in Israel, and God equals his decrees and his laws. He gives them to you so you know more of who he is, so you behave more like him. That's his whole point and purpose. Following in verse 121, it says, I have done what is righteous and just. So again, he's older. Do not leave me to my oppressors. My eyes fail. I'm getting older, looking for your righteous promise, right? I think he's getting older. He's calling out against his enemies. Verse 126, it is time for you to act, Lord. Your law is being broken. He's watching all these people around mess with his law. Next section, it says in verse 133, direct my footsteps according to your word. Let no sin rule over me, and redeem me, save me, pay the price for me from human oppression. So while people are hurting me. Moving into this next section, verse 139, he says, my zeal wears me out because my enemies ignore your words. Is this a prophet? Maybe, right? So he's like, I've been sent out. I'm telling all these people these things. I'm living in such a way. I am following all of your decrees, and nobody's listening. Lord, I need you to do something, right? He says, your promises have been thoroughly tested and your servant loves them. Verse 145, I will call with all my heart. Answer me, Lord. I obey your decrees. Coming near the end, guys, it says, I will call out to you, save me, and I will keep your statutes. Verse 152, long ago I learned from your statutes that you established them to last forever. So the statutes never fail. God never fails his people. This next section is where I feel he's desperate. Look on my suffering and deliver me, for I have not forgotten your law. Defend my cause and redeem me. Preserve my life according to your promise. Verse 158, I look on the faithless with loathing, for they do not obey your word. I was just thinking that maybe this is Jeremiah. I don't know. I literally have no idea, but I'm just thinking maybe it is. right? Because he's out there. We don't see it yet, but we will see it. Him or Isaiah are out there talking to the people, and the people ignore him. Rulers persecute me without cause, but my heart trembles at your word. So even after all he's been through in 164, 7 times a day, I praise you for your righteous laws. And then we're going to finish in verse 176. I said it did not have a happy ending. I have strayed like a lost sheep. Seek your servant, for I have not forgotten your commands. He is obviously in an area where it's not safe for him. And so he's still seeking out the Lord and asking the Lord to find him. That's how we end for today. And so that is just one Psalm 119. So read it, take your time in it. If you need to go back, read over some things. I'd love to hear your thoughts on who you might think it might be, or any other thoughts in regards to this Psalm. So that's it for today. If it's been a blessing, guys, I want you to like this, share it, subscribe to the channel so you get them, ring the bell so you get notifications, because I put a new video out every day. In the meantime, keep reading. I'll see you tomorrow.